Hello everyone, it's Scott. We're back for Friday's previews from week 2 of Final Fantasy spoiler season. We got a lot of rares to talk about today, but before we do, remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Final Fantasy spoiler season and beyond. And if you're looking for cards from the set, you can check us out on the web at caffeinatedgamers.tcgplayerpro.com. Alright, let's dive in. So, Rebane, Bull of Ala Mingo, for 1 and a red mana, you get a legendary creature that's a human warrior and is a 2/2 with ward, and your ward cost is pay life equal to Rebane's power. And Rebane's, when he attacks, attach up to 1 target equipment you control to target attacking creature. So this is the payoff card for equipment. When you can freely attach stuff, we got a ton of really good equipment cards from the set, and some of those, attachment cost or equipping costs are 4 and 5 mana. Well, you can now play those cards because of Rebane, because they can be attached now basically for free. We're going to have a good equipment deck going into Final Fantasy Standard Season, so I'm excited to play with this card. I think it's going to be a key card in our Boros equipment deck. Next, we've got Ninja's Blades for 2 and a black mana. You get an equipment with Job Select. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and is a ninja in addition to its other types, and has, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, then discard a card. That player loses life equal to the discarded card's mana value, and the equip cost is 2. This is a really good card. I think black decks will want this because being able to discard whatever, throw anything in the bin that you want, and your opponent loses life equal to the mana value of that. So let's throw an Atraxa in the bin, or any of the other big reanimation targets in black, and all of a sudden one time hitting your opponent and they've now lost 7, 8, 9 life, and that's crippling in a game of Standard to lose that much life in one turn from a discard effect. So because of that, I think this is going to be a really, really powerful card in Standard, and I think in other formats as well. I think Pioneer decks might want this as well, because again, they've got some good stuff that they're trying to get to as well. So Ninja's Blade, I think, is going to be a very powerful card. Next, we've got Van, Street Thief for 2 and a red mana. You get a legendary creature that's a human scout and is a 2/2. And whenever 1 or more scouts, pirates, and or rogues you control deal combat damage to a player, exile the top card of that player's library. You may cast it. If you don't, create a treasure token. Whenever you cast a spell you don't own, put a +1/+1 counter on each scout, pirate, and rogue you control. Incredibly busted card here potentially. The fact that you can build a deck around scouts, pirates, and rogues pretty easily in Standard, but you can do that in other formats as well. I mean, there's been a Pioneer Rogues deck that kind of goes back to the deck we had in Standard about 5 years ago that was a rogue deck. So I think this is going to be a very, very powerful card in Standard, and probably in other formats as well, because the ability just to play cards, do a little bit of damage to your opponent, everything gets a +1/+1 counter if you can play that card, I think is incredibly powerful in Standard and in other formats. Next, we've got Balam Garden, Seed Academy. It's a land and a town, and this land enters tapped, and it provides green or blue mana. And for 5, a green and a blue mana, you can transform it, and this ability costs 1 less to activate for each other town you control. So another land that's a town payoff. So you can get this down to 2 mana if you are playing a town deck. And when you transform it, you get Balam Garden Airborne. It's a legendary artifact vehicle and is a 5/4 with flying. And whenever Balam Garden attacks, you get to draw a card, and its crew cost is 1. And it seems like all the crew costs for almost all the vehicles in Final Fantasy is just one. So I think that's going to make them all very playable. And this one obviously is going to be very good in a town deck. But outside of that, I think this is going to have standard playability in some other decks if we've got enough town cards to get that cost down to 4 or 5. Then I think for what Bala Garden represents, that ability every time you attack to draw a card, I think that's standard playable, and we might even see it in some older formats. And certainly Commander players will want this in their decks. Next, we've got Hope S-Time for a white and a blue mana. You get a legendary creature that's a human wizard and is a 2/2 with lifelink, and at the beginning of your end step, each opponent mills X cards, where X is the amount of life you gained this turn. So incredibly powerful card here for 2 mana. I would assume this will slot nicely into our life gain deck that we already have in standard. That's mostly white but a little bit of black, and maybe now it goes to Azorius colors or maybe even Esper colors to really take advantage of Hope's ability to force your opponent to mill cards and you gaining life when that happens. So I see this as potentially a very, very broken card in standard, and I think people will try to break this one, because if you can gain 4 or 5 life in a turn, it doesn't seem like it's a lot to force your opponent to mill 5 cards, but gaining 5 more life, and we already have the white ley line in standard that gives you a bonus power and toughness when you reach 27 life. So with that plus this, I think we're going to see the life gain deck become more powerful in standard. Next, we've got Tella Great Sage for 3, a green and a red mana. You get a legendary creature that's a human wizard and is a 3/3. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you get to create a 1/1 colorless hero creature token. If 4 or more mana was spent to cast that spell, draw 2 cards. If 8 or more mana was spent to cast that spell, sacrifice Tella, and it deals that much damage to each opponent. So Tella is a very powerful magic card. I am a little bit skeptical that this will see standard play, and my simple reason for that is it costs 5 mana. The current Prowess deck isn't going to want that. Maybe the Jeskai control deck would want this as kind of a top end card where you play this and then you just keep playing your good spells, and as a result of that you're going to get hero tokens. But that's the only place I see this having playability, because you're probably not going to build a deck around Tella. Next, we've got Clive's Hideaway. It's a land and a town. It's got Hideaway 4. When this land enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library, exile 1 face down, then put the rest on the bottom in a random order. It provides colorless mana, and for 2 you can tap it, and you may play the exile card without paying its mana cost if you control 4 or more legendary creatures. So really powerful land here. We've seen Hideaway as an ability on a variety of cards over the last couple of years, and they've all been playable in standard. So I would think that Clive's Hideaway would qualify as well, where you play this, but it has to be in a legendary creature deck. And we've got a really critical mass of legendary creatures right now in standard, because we're going to get a ton from this Final Fantasy set. Outlaws of Thunder Junction provided us with a ton of legendary cards. So because of that, I think this is going to be a very, very useful card in a Legends Matters deck. Next, we've got Ultima. For 3 and 2 white mana, you get a sorcery, and you get to destroy all artifacts and creatures and end the turn. Exile all spells and abilities from the stack, including this card. The player whose turn it is discards down to their maximum hand size, damage wears off, and this turn and until end of turn effects end. So if I'm reading this right, I think really what they're trying to allow you to do, and we've got a couple cards that do this, is you play this on your opponent's turn and it simply ends their turn and then it goes to yours. That would be a very powerful ability in Standard, and the ability to destroy all the artifacts and all the creatures, I think will make Ultima a playable board wipe in Standard for sure. We've already got our Jeskai control deck. This seems to slot into that well. So I think we'll see Ultima a lot over the next couple of years. All right, now let's talk about some of the lower rarity cards we got for the day. The first is Ultras Obnoxious Octopus for 1 and a blue mana. You get a legendary creature. That's an octopus and a 2/1. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if at least 4 mana was spent to cast it, tap target creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it. So nice payoff. I think a very good limited ability. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if at least 8 mana was spent to cast it, put 8 +1/+1 counters on Ultras. So probably more of a meme card than anything else, where it looks good on the surface, but right now we don't have a lot of spells that cost 4 to 8 or 8 mana that we're seeing a lot of play in Standard, and a lot of those tend to be the board wipes that we see. But maybe this fits into the Jeskai deck. We've got Jeskai Ascendancy, as something to play early in the game, and then as you play things, you can tap down some of your opponent's creatures. You play our Jeskai Ascendancy, and that allows you to, hopefully activate your 8 mana ability. But outside of that, I don't see this as Standard playable, because it's a 2/1 and you really don't have a lot of value with it otherwise. Next, we've got Sleep Magic for a blue mana. You get an enchantment, that's an aura. You get to enchant creature. When this aura enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature. Enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. And when enchanted creature is dealt damage, sacrifice this aura. So interesting ability at the end there. Dealing damage to that card would cause it to get rid of Sleep Magic. But Sleep Magic is a typical blue limited removal card where you can't remove the card, but you're able to tap it down. So unless its controller can kill the aura, it can't be used in combat anymore. It's an important way to take out a powerful creature that your opponent has by putting it in essence to sleep. Next, we've got Cargo Ship for 1 and a blue mana. You get an artifact vehicle. That's a 2/3. It has flying and vigilance, and you can tap it to add colorless mana, and you can spend this mana only to cast an artifact spell or activate an ability of an artifact source, and its crew cost is 1. So very nice card in limited, and I think some blue decks will want this because it's got vigilance. So not only are you going to be able to crew it and attack with it, but then you can also use its mana ability to cast another artifact spell or activate an ability of an artifact later on that turn. Next, we've got Overkill for 2 and a black mana. You get an instant. Target creature gets -0, -9,999 until end of turn. So basically kill a creature. So this is one of our limited removal spells for the upcoming limited season for Final Fantasy. Next, we've got Ride the Shoepuff for 1 and a green mana. You get an enchantment, and it has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. And for 5 and 2 green mana, this enchantment becomes a 7/7 beast creature in addition to its other types. So I think this is Standard playable. We do already have a good landfall deck in Standard, and this is a little bit better because most of the landfall cards that are part of that deck are creatures, so they're obviously susceptible to removal. But Ride the Shoepuff is an enchantment, so I think that's going to make it a little bit better than some of those cards in a landfall deck, because whenever those lands enter, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on things, and standard removal isn't going to get rid of this. They have to have specific enchantment removal. And our last card of the day is Black Waltz #3 for 2 black and a red mana. You get a legendary creature that's a wizard and is a 2/2 with flying and death touch. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Black Waltz #3 deals 2 damage to each opponent. So this is a gutter snipe that costs 1 more mana, and that additional mana is a black mana. Gutter snipe, 10, 15 years ago was a good card, but because we have so much cheap removal in standard, I think outside of limited, we're probably not going to see Black Waltz #3, because it costs 4 mana and is only a 2/2 and dies to cut down, and a lot of other basic removal that we see in standard. So it's a great ability on it. I wish it would work, but unfortunately it probably won't. All right, so those are our cards for Friday of our second full week of Final Fantasy spoilers. I've left a link here to our full Final Fantasy playlist, so you can check out our other videos on Final Fantasy previews. And thanks again for staying to the end of the video, and I will see you in the next one.